from Australia. It is quite a way, and it's well and truly worth the effort. And thank you to the Ghanaian people here who have welcomed all of the delegates from around the world. So thank you for that. I'd like to briefly give you a brief background on the subject of this conference. I've got 20 years experience in product stewardship across a wide range of products, and I was part of the small team that established Seamless, the Australian product stewardship scheme, for which we're very proud. I've also mapped the flow of clothing in Australia from import, consumption, discarding, local reuse, recycling, and export for global reuse. And as mentioned, I am currently heading the ReFuture Foundation, which is focused on maximising the environmental and social benefit of the global trade in second-hand clothing that we all need to be proud of. We have already funded some important projects here in Ghana and in Kenya and at a global level. And I would really relish the opportunity to engage with many of you about collaborating with the Foundation in the future. This is my second visit to Ghana, and the warmth I received previously has made this a favourite destination for me. I was fortunate enough last year to attend the Paris Olympic Games, and I forgot to take an Australian flag with me, but I enthusiastically waved my Ghanaian flag to support your athletes. I'd also like to pay tribute to, yes, go the Black Stars too. I'd like to pay tribute to Yera from the Revival, who isn't here because he's in London at the moment receiving important recognition for the work that he and the Revival do, and so many other organisations that, as I look around the room, that are doing fantastic work. Global manufacturing and purchase of new clothing has increased dramatically in recent years. Countries in the global north now have clothing purchasing rates that have doubled in the past 20 years. In Australia, where I live, the rate is now an annual purchase over 50 items of new clothing per person. I feel quite ashamed about that, to be honest. This figure would be similar in North America and much of Europe. And Australia now has 400,000 tonnes of new clothing going into the community every year, and of course a similar amount coming out. And as a result of that, we send 200,000 tonnes of clothing to landfill, half of which is wearable. Through clothing charities, there is significant local donation and reuse of second-hand clothing, but this is transferring only 20% of the clothing discarded by the original purchaser back into local reuse. Now, not only is the quantity of clothing produced rising, but the quality of garments is declining, driven by a goal to make clothes ever cheaper. And there can be no doubt that the current fashion industry is unsustainable, and a dramatic reduction in manufacture and consumption is absolutely essential and has to be central to our drive for sustainability. A major challenge for global brands is to design clothing that is more enduring, even if that life is through multiple garment owners well removed from the original purchaser. The current practice in most of the global north is to export the donated clothing that exceeds what can be sold back locally. In the case of Australia, we send 123,000 tonnes of clothing, or 500 million garments, into export annually. Now, Australia's only a relatively small exporter, accounting for just 5% of the global export trade. There are at least 12 countries that export larger amounts than us. Of that clothing exported, around 65 to 70% is wearable clothing, with the remainder suitable only for recycling or destruction. Despite the significant scale of this trade, most consumers in the global north are unaware of the nature of this trade. And if this trade is not transparent to the public and is not delivering benefits equally to both exporting and importing countries, then it becomes a case of disappearing our clothing. and that is not acceptable. And the organisation I represent, ReFuture Foundation, is established to ensure that trade delivers benefits to all and can truly be classified as fair trade. While in Ghana previously, I was astonished how few global brands have ever visited here, the destination of many millions of their garments. It is undoubtedly the case that wearable second-hand clothing is offering affordable garments to many people across the world. And it is also driving large-scale employment and helping to ensure that we're getting a more complete overall beneficial use for each garment that has been produced. Now, there is a driving movement globally for extended producer responsibility. Brands who profit from the original sale of the garments they procure need to share the responsibility for the final outcome of their clothing. Just because the garment brands sell to a primary consumer, that does not allow them to have no regard for the life and destinations of their clothes, the resources they have profited from, and the end-of-use outcomes. In recent years, we've seen a much greater emphasis on how clothes are made, the fibre sourcing, the fabric production, and the conditions for the workers producing the garments sold by corporations large and small. This increased focus on clothing manufacture now needs to be mirrored in a shared effort to maintain the life of our clothes and to ensure the highest order outcomes for each garment as it transfers from its original purchaser to others around the globe. The past linear model of our sector of make, use and discard is no longer acceptable. We cannot treat finite resources and the human effort in an environmentally irresponsible manner. We need to develop a fully circular model for our clothing that encompasses high quality, more durable production, reduced purchase, capture and transfer of all wearable clothing, and end-of-life recovery and fibre-to-fibre recycling back into clothing. At the moment, we have a global trade in second-hand clothing that delivers many benefits in providing affordable clothing and extensive employment. But the trade is not without its challenges. Too often, the clothing transferred is based on the needs of the originating country rather than the demands of the recipient country and its community. For us to have an enduring fair trade, this has to change. All parties, brands, retailers, governments and consumers need to be part of this change. The ReFuture Foundation is committed to this change, starting with a much greater level of transparency around the trade and its benefits and challenges. We see it as essential that the tracking of all exported clothing goes to making sure that a rigorous sorting process is taken place before garments are entering destination markets. We have to ensure that sorting facilities around the world operate to strict guidelines that ensure their working conditions are strong and only wearable and culturally and climatically saleable clothing is sent to destination markets. We must get to the point where every bale of clothing is as specified and free of unwearable or unsaleable garments. We have to establish guidelines for optimal sorting practice, and I'm pleased that these are being fully implemented in a new large-scale facility commencing next month in Sri Lanka. Every shipping container leaving the port there will carry only wearable and saleable quality clothing to destinations such as Ghana. The remaining garments will be diverted for different forms of upcycling and recycling. This practice needs to be replicated globally, and I challenge all stakeholders to work with us to achieve that. I've just come from one of the largest sorters in Dubai, and they're keen to pursue adherence to the guidelines that we've developed. The global trade is encountering some major challenges around shipping costs, regulatory changes, and the overall cost of collection, sorting and transfer of clothing. It seems likely that we will need to review and change the financial model for this trade if it is to remain strong into the future. At the current time, Ghana and other countries like it have a very narrow role in clothing circularity. Receiving and selling second-hand clothing is tremendous, but I believe Ghana has the potential to benefit from a much more diverse and integrated model. I also believe that the trade would benefit from having fewer middlemen and a more direct transfer of sorted clothing from the global north more directly to the local traders. I see no reason why sorting of clothing should occur in transit destinations such as Dubai, where the workers are far from their home countries, often in a position of vulnerability. If we can build a state-of-the-art, fully compliant sorting facility in Sri Lanka, we can do the same here in Ghana, with a corresponding increase in employment and control of the outcomes. Similarly, we know there is a need to collect unwearable clothing at the end of life and utilise this resource into future clothing production. I can see a time where Ghana plays a leading role in garment fibre sorting and a new fibre and fabric production. As a cotton-producing country, Ghana has an opportunity to integrate virgin and recycled fibre into new fabric. Once again, the economic and employment potential of this is huge. Now, countries like Australia produce very little of our clothing. We import over 97% of our clothing from China, Bangladesh, India and other countries. It makes very little sense for fibre recycling to be established in my country, with extremely high labour costs and no local clothing sector of scale to utilise any recycled fibre. It makes much more sense for this infrastructure to be developed in a centre where much of the clothing is reaching end of life, such as Ghana. Whether we are looking at natural fibres such as cotton or synthetic fibres such as polyester, nylon, acrylic, we need a large-scale infrastructure solution for a global circular industry. There's a need for key infrastructure in shredding, spinning and fabrication, and Ghana is an ideal site for this at scale. It will be important that Ghanaian industry and government come together to drive this, but it is equally important that global brands and major development banks also get behind this outcome. With over 100,000 tonnes of clothing coming into Ghana annually, we must aspire to have a domestic clothing collection system here and an equal scale recycling sector underpinning our collection efforts. My vision is for a much reduced global new clothing production, perhaps reduced by 25% or more. And combining with that, significant recycled fibre utilisation. And importantly, the destination markets such as Ghana have a robust and economically significant clothing circularity role across extensive collection, local scale resorting, reuse and fibre recycling in the tens of thousands of tonnes at a minimum. We will continue to work with outstanding organisations like the Revival and Africa Collects Textiles in Kenya and many others to bring about system change. We owe it to our communities and to our rivers, lagoons and beaches to transform the current practice to one that meets our circular and fair trade aspirations.